Jim, it's Dan here in Abu Dhabi joining the conversation. To another point, do you think Russia should be ejected from the G20?
Well, I've just come to the conclusion that I can't see us sitting in the room with the Russians, with someone who's now going to be called a war criminal, and talking about world affairs and economics and things that the G20 talk about. I don't think the G20 will vote to kick the Russians out, to eject them. I think this is something that China is going to want to keep them in there. I think perhaps Indonesia. So it might be this is a time when the U.S. and our friends and allies don't show up for a meeting, or will send lower-ranking representatives to sit in those meetings. It's going to be hard for us, on the one hand, to be worried about Putin's use of chemical or nuclear weapons in the fight in Ukraine, and then on the other hand, sit with him around a table, giving him the pleasure of feeling that he is one of this crowd, drinking coffee with him. I just can't see that happening. I don't see us showing up and this business as usual. We're going to have to do something.
Jim, when it comes to that China-Russia relationship, do you think we have seen a significant shift just in the past 24 hours, or is this a partnership that is now too big to fail given the opposition that Russia faces from the West?
Well, I think the partnership is too big to fail for Moscow, that's for sure. And I think Moscow is going to run into the problem of being seen as playing second fiddle to China. And when there's a dependency, it's going to be Russia depending on China for so many things as these sanctions really bite, and it goes into the long term. I think that's where the problem is going to be in that relationship. Is what is Russia going to do about that? And for China, I think they're going to have to moderate how close they get to Russia in terms of Ukraine. Again, what's good for China is its business relationships, its economic relationships. This is something where China doesn't want to do anything that would damage that. It's got to worry about sanctions on itself from the West or from the United States. So this partnership the dynamics are changing. And I guess what I would say is that this partnership doesn't look as firm and as tight as it did a month or two ago when that statement was released, the Chinese-Russian statement on their relationship and how strong it is. Everyone said, my God, we've got a new axis here. And I'm not saying that they are not going to be partners, but it's a partnership that right now we're seeing how complex it can be and how there can be winners and losers in that partnership.
Indeed, and the clear concern on the Chinese side is that if Russia were to go ahead and indeed use something like chemical weapons or worse or equivalent, then they would be forced to act on that relationship. Jim, I just wanted to stress test that line on chemical weapons with you, because this is something that President Biden was addressing yesterday. He said that the nature of the American response and the response from the West would depend on the nature of the use. But in your view, would the use of chemical weapons constitute an Article 5 offence equivalent that would prompt a NATO response?
Well, that's the question. And that was certainly discussed yesterday by heads of state and government, and also certainly day by day by folks in Washington working with their counterparts in the allied countries, is trying to figure out an answer to your question. Is what do we do? What does a proportional reaction look like in terms of an Article 5 like approach? We're not talking here about chemical weapons being used against an ally. This is being used in Ukraine, but does that then up the game? And it certainly ups the pressure on the United States and on NATO to do something. I don't think we could sit back and allow that to happen and say, well, we'll send more stingers. I think it's going to be something where the West is going to have to up its game in a way that doesn't make it worse in terms of a Russian response. That's tough, and frankly, it does depend on what that usage looks like. If it's large scale and it's a horrible humanitarian disaster, that's going to call for a response much greater than something that's more localized. But even looking at it that way, it just shows how terrible the question becomes for the West. We'll have to do something, and that's what they're looking at now, or what are those options?